my name is Sridhar Rangan. I'm the festival director of the Kashish Pride Film Festival, which is having its online edition from August 15th to September 15th. And we are right now in week two of the festival. So we already passed 1 week. This is the second week. And we are bringing you a bunch of feature films and short film programs and having Q&As with each of the filmmakers as much as we can. So we are right now going to be chatting with the filmmakers of the film Because of You, A History of Kilawin Kolektibo, with the directors Barbara Malalan and Desireena Almoradi. So I'm going to read out their short bios per se. Barbara identifies as they, them, is a queer and non-binary interdisciplinary artist and the child of immigrants from the Philippines. They grew up in the middle-class family and earned a degree in media studies from the New School. Barbara's work focuses on exploring autobiographical stories of community through video and audio narratives. Throughout their career, they have worked both as an artist and an educator. Awesome. And Desireena identifies as she and they, is a queer filmmaker who emigrated from the Philippines to New York at the age of 11. They grew up in Queens, earned a degree in film from NYU, wow, and has dedicated their career to the documentary field with a focus on collective history and BIPOC lives. Desireena lives in Washington Heights in NYC with a partner, their young child, and their dog. How cute. Okay, I'm going to read out a short synopsis of the film. Joyful, raw, revolutionary. Because of You, A History of Kilawin Kolektibo tells the story of queer Filipnxs who, in the 1990s, against a racist, lesbophobic backdrop, came together for the first time in NYC to create a safe and loving community. Culling from a treasure trove of over a quarter century's worth of historic documentation, wow, that includes footage, photographs, interviews, and ephemera. The film tells the inspiring story of members as they found each other, fell in love, and became each other's lifeblood amidst a society that rejected them. From marching, partying, and protesting to its oftentimes incestuous sexual politics, we all know that, the film serves as an exhilarating memorial to the rebellion and nostalgia of the 90s. And to moderate the panel, we once again have Nadika, our dear friend, who has been a part of the preview team for many years. So Nadika is a kind of a writer, a sort of researcher, and a bit of a teacher. She's interested in cities, history and archaeology, gender and sexuality, internet, technology, rights, and the intersections of these. Wow. After working in advertising and journalism, Nadika studied documentary and film production for her MA, working on many student and independent productions. She has also written for TV in Tamil and set up a digital magazine covering cinema in India. She reviews films for various publications. She does not watch OTT, the streaming platform, any streaming platform, but may eventually clock the most hours spent on YouTube. So we can also find out what is she watching on YouTube currently. So thank you for moderating this particular panel, Nadika, and welcome Barbara and Desireena. And over to Nadika for having a conversation with them.
Thank you, Sridhar. Hi, Barbara. Hi, Desireena. Thank you for coming on. I want to say, first of all, I really loved the film. I really loved the film when I watched it first. I watched it again yesterday just to refresh myself, and it was as fresh as I remembered it, and it as moving. So very, very, thank you very much for bringing this film for us to Kashish and for talking to us. I'm really happy to do this. Yes. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about the name Kilawin Kolektibo, because I understand it has it's made up of a multiple sort of words in the Tagalog and a couple of other So I want you to talk a little bit about that term Kilawin Kolektibo and why that resonates so much for all of you in the collective.
So Kilawin is a word that means raw. So it could be raw meat or raw fish. So it's a type of dish, Kilawin. Kolektibo is a portmanteau of collective, and tibo. Tibo is a slang for lesbian in the Tagalog language. And so I think one of our first meetings, we were sitting around playing with words. Filipinos love puns, so there's a lot of double meanings in Kilawin Kolektibo. Kilawin could indicate, raw, spicy, you can go somewhere else with that. I don't know if Barb, you want to elaborate?
I mean, we could talk about like the the feeling, right, that we want to exude as a group, right, as an identity of, hot and spicy, food as well as politic, as well as our personality behind, the name.
Definitely. I mean, there are bits of the film that was quite raw, and it hits me quite sharply, right? There are bits of it, especially the bits where the middle bit where it says "I hate you," and the bits that talk about, we'll go into that little bit later. I kind of know the narrative arc of the film, so we'll go into it later. But there are bits of it that hit me really raw, and and that's why when I was looking up, and you also mention it in various places. So that idea of rawness versus the idea of using the archival footage, it really resonated well, and thank you for this. Uh, you mentioned that these are photos that are, photos and videos taken over the years of all of the people of the collective and your friends and the pride marches in New York City and places like that. How much time did you all take to put this together? I mean, the hunt itself would have taken you years and years of finding it.
So Barb's and I were filming back in the 90s just for our own enjoyment, not thinking we would do anything, ever do anything with it. And then we went our separate ways, like it's alluded to in the film that we had a falling out. And then during the pandemic, there was an interest in the history, the activist history in New York City of Filipino groups. And we were included in a panel that was presented by Filipino American National Historical Society. I did a PowerPoint presentation that included a lot of the photographs that Panday Banale took, which wound up in the film. And there was such an amazing feedback from that presentation. And I thought to myself, we have all this footage, we need to do something. Like, people are really hungry for this. And so Barb can tell us. Yeah.
And so during our time, I was shooting a lot of video for just posterity, right? One day we'll take a look at these videos and just appreciate it, and just put it back into a box. And somehow the plan just kind of turned something different in terms of, like, I was able to keep my personal, videos close to me over the years, as well as process through, like, why am I holding on to this? Until we found the purpose through our elder in the community, Panday Banale, which Desireena, mentioned, who brought us together to combine different elements of our media, of our history recording, into something that people were really hungry for.
And that the actual post-production coming together, the presentation was in 2020. So more or less 5 years of putting that material together. We both have full-time jobs. So this was, on our off time.
Yeah.
One of the things that, something of this nature almost always brings out is the idea of talking about ourselves, talking about our identities, ourselves versus how people look at us from outside, right? The idea of ethnography versus autoethnography. How do you look at this film in that aspect? How much was there an attempt to correct how other people looked at Filipino queer people, people of color in the US who are queer, versus how they're being represented versus how you wanted to be represented?
I can start.
Yeah, that's a really great
question.
question.
That's a great question. I love these questions. The more we screen, we find lots of different types of questions that can fulfill everybody's experience of the film. I feel like with our interest to bring our different stories to this like archival documentary, we were thinking about, well, are we listening to the audience or are we listening to the stories in the film? And what kind of responsibilities do we have as individual filmmakers and collaborators in terms of, should we show folks, should we be on our best behavior? Or should we, angle the story into something more about the nuances of the personal, behind the banner? And that's how I'm going to be starting that part. You want to elaborate?
Yeah, we didn't want to create a story that was just rah, 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 look at us, we're so great. We wanted something more nuanced. And I don't, when you talk about responsibility to your community, to me, responsibility is being authentic and not sugarcoating, and being real. Like, I don't want to make a film that pretends that everything is great. So that's the film we made. And, in terms of the community, we weren't necessarily thinking of the mainstream audience here. We were doing this film for ourselves and for our community. And that's what's come through in terms of screening the film. It's a lot of Filipinx queer people are like, when they watch the film, they yell at the screen and they laugh and they cry and they're like, that's me, but obviously it's also a universal experience because we've screened in the UK, we're screening, Kashish has programmed us. So it's a universal experience, like, of queer community finding each other and having petty fights and then coming back together. So I think, while we not necessarily didn't, we didn't really think about a mainstream audience. We knew that this would resonate, like this story would resonate, and it's a universal story.
And I feel that looking back, because we were not thinking of the audience, it's like the sky's the limit. It was so freeing.
Yes.
Not to think of Hollywood.
Yeah.
It was so freeing not to think of an American audience or a Eurocentric audience. It was sort of like we did this in the confines of the borough of Queens, which is sort of like the very integrated melting pot of New York City. And everybody around the world was just situated there. And that was our world, the globe, like the entire globe, like in our neighborhood. So that was basically the truth that we were telling to start with.
Yeah.
I'd like you to go a little bit more into this idea of caught between two different identities. One as a Filipino person in the predominantly sort of American white culture, and then within the Filipino community being gay or queer. And I'd like you to go a little bit more about it, and because these are some of the questions that we've been talking about as queer people for the longest time. I have been talking of myself as a trans woman, as a lesbian, as someone who is still attracted to women presenting people. But therefore, am I trans enough or not trans enough? Those are the questions that, and when I go into larger places, I ask about, do I belong to the trans community of South India or India or Tamil speak? Those are questions that I ask myself. But surely it would have been a lot more difficult for you to ask those questions in the 90s and the early 2000s. And, I want you to talk about that a little bit.
That's great. An excellent question, because of the question, makes me think of, should we have a passport to show all of our diasporic selves, right? Like, what is a trans diaspora? Like, what's a lesbian or a butch diaspora? Like, here's that passport, stamp it. Am I enough of something or not? But I also recall that back in the day, these identity politics were also very nuanced and very new for us. And I would say a number of us, even in the group, felt a bit hesitant to talk about it, the sensitivity, or we didn't have the wording for it because we were working with different types of identities, such as the Philippine identity, the with language, with culture, and like whether or not we were a culture fit being in a Philippine diaspora. So that's to start off with. The second part is, if you recall that in the piece, there was different representations of folks coming from different parts of the spectrum. And we only just started to break into that conversation with Marco. And then there was the whole presentation of like, well, what is the lifespan of ourselves in the community as we build relationships? Are we a community? Is there a community without, politics? Is there politics with community? What are we when we don't have community? So, when we talk about like these different diaspora selves, like, that is a wonderful way to kind of bridge these conversations of like, where did it start? Like, do we continue with it? What is there like even a lifespan for it? How does that transform?
I guess I'll just add to that. The 90s was like, New York was it, like, for queer people, for gay people. It was like the gay 90s, right? We were on the cover of Time, lipstick lesbians were in. It was such such a great time to be queer, but it was also a time of great assimilation for queer people into the mainstream, American community. And so there was that push and pull of like, oh, identity politics, this is politics, this is who I am, but I'm really not that different from anyone else. So there was this kind of like a two-headed monster. And, for us being brown, we couldn't really assimilate, right? Like we talk about the racism in the queer community. We experienced that. We would walk into a lesbian bar speaking our language and people would turn around and look at us like, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. You can't be both Filipino and queer. Just pick one, But, through the group, we decided to own all of it, So that's what I'll say about that.
The couple of things that you mentioned now that I want, that I wanted to latch on to. One is the idea of how long do we exist in this society? I mean, how long do we? What's our timeline like? What are we doing with our lives within the society, within the community, within the activist spaces, or the and saying, and this is something that I think about a lot, because when I started doing activism, it seemed like we were working towards something fun and happy and joyful. And now it just seems to be a lot of hitting our head against a wall. And 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 that's happened in my timeline. So I'm wondering how it's been for people who've been there for much longer. What is the timeline like for you all?
Doesn't necessarily show in the film, but the lifespan that we talk about in the film it's very short. It's like 5 years. It was like a flame that burned bright and then fizzled, So that's what usually happens. There's such an intense energy around getting to know people, being excited, there's that sexual energy, and there's also this, this collective desire to be seen and to do things. And then it becomes too much, right? It becomes too close. Everyone is in each other's business and you just get sick of it. And you, frankly, you grow older and you don't need this anymore. Your focus changes, right? Like it's alluded to in the film. Marco says we're all getting older. Some of us don't go to the bars anymore. We have monogamous relationships now, like we have different priorities. So I think that's what happened with us,
And I feel too that, as we've explored our own lives, personal lives outside of the community in terms of growing, like there were some kind of misunderstandings and kind of hurt feelings of like, why would you leave the group? We would do this forever, we would be friends forever. We'd be fighting the same things forever. But what happens when folks started to get married, right? Domestic partnership, folks get married, people can have kids. There's definitely more rights in the job. Like, so then is there a way, like, what are we fighting for then? And even like years after, 30 years after, what are we still fighting for the same things? And we are learning that for the new folks, the new generations, a lot of this is being taken away of what we've worked hard for. And so it feels a lot more urgent to share that, hey, folks, hang in there. We are doing this together as a group. And I'm glad that we can, continue to have these conversations. It might not be the end all, just because, you can achieve this particular venture because you have your rights. What if it's taken away? Then how do we come together again between the different ages, the intergenerational ways of perspective?
Yeah, I think there was a time that we became complacent, right? Like we thought we finally achieved equality. And now overnight with this administration, everything's being taken away. And it's very scary. So people especially now are really the film is really resonating with folks.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That also as which the film itself seems like it's not just a love letter for yourselves, it's a love letter for the people who've come after you and the people who are going to, are going to be there. So, I want to focus on that word "tibo" that you mentioned earlier, which means lesbian in a slang word for lesbian. And I want to understand, was there in within the community, was there an idea, because this is part of what identity politics has become now, right? How do we reclaim words? How do we reclaim power and agency and things like that using language? Was there any talk about using better language now than what was, because earlier people could when I was starting to come out as a trans person, people could get away with saying tranny and it was not a bad word, but now it's a bad word. uh, Words like dyke and butch and things have gone through their cycles. So is there any, over the years, has there been conversations within yourselves among the larger BIPOC community, queer trans BIPOC community, on these kinds of words, and how do you reclaim these things?
I mean, I think within our group, there was always an irreverence and a disregard for political correctness within the group. It was kind of, we had our own kind of way of communicating that to an outsider might be a little bit problematic. Not to say that we obviously weren't aware of politics, but we didn't really pay much attention to language. And I think, it depends on who's using the language, right? If you say, if you say bakla, which means gay, right? And if a straight person is saying bakla, or saying it in a way that is obviously derogatory, right? Oy bakla, which means, hey, you faggot, that's different from you owning that word and saying gay boy, bakla, tomboy, which while you're marching, right? Tomboy is another word that we reclaimed back in the day, right? Tomboy, like you want to be a boy, but yeah, we are tomboy. We want to sleep with women, so it's reclaiming that language. And I guess what I'm trying to say is we didn't necessarily police ourselves around language. I don't know, Barbara, if you have a.
From what I recall, there was a different prioritizations in terms of like the language that we were using in these manners were terms of affection, right? And it was also evident also among the gay groups as well, in terms of, well, you shouldn't be using that. It was more of a straight binary way of looking at policing in terms of, behaviors where folks wanted to do particular discretions of things that were considered rebel against the binary, against like a gender binary. Was sort of like, ooh, well, it's as long as it was more like male presenting, as opposed to like, the eradication of like the feminine in like, queerness. So this is, again, it was a different time. And I want to say sometimes I think that perhaps even alluding to our identities, how we, presented ourselves, has our time passed? Is there opportunities for us to re-examine and to make connections with the newer communities, and for the newer communities to appreciate the transformation of looking at gender, of looking at history, that we can continue to do this together and work together as opposed to policing. It's hard to work with someone if you are always policed. It's sort of like, I'm already wrong for just existing. I'm so sorry. And I don't want to apologize. I want someone to share with me, oh, we say it differently, or we look at it differently these days. I want to know in that matter. I want to give the respect to it. And I'm also wanting to do the homework as well. So we hope that the film could help open up those discussions.
There is definitely a move to a more sort of authoritative, fundamental sort of political climate anywhere in the world right now. And there's definitely still more, especially in the US and parts of India also, and everywhere, there is definitely sort of hate for queerness and queer people. And you mentioned in the film also that the idea of hate against Filipino queer still exists. So how is it? What are there measures that are being taken now? Is the collective still sort of the collective, in whatever form it exists now, does it still do some of these things?
Necessarily doing a specific action around racism per se, or homophobia or lesbophobia. Currently, I mean, I think the film is a great tool in combating that. You know, we've experienced that certain communities are more receptive to the film than other communities. But yeah, I mean, I live in a bubble in New York City, right? Like, you know, it's not necessarily indicative of, you know, middle America or the South, where there's a lot more open hostility for brown people or for, you know, for queer people. So, you know, besides bringing the film to these different communities, we're not actively working to combat that. We're hoping to we are connecting with like nonprofit orgs that represent, you know, as I mentioned before, the Filipino American National Historical Society. We're hoping to do some, you know, a formal collaboration with them to bring the film to different chapters around the country. So that's kind of the work we're doing.
And with the screenings, we have had members from back in the day come to screen and not just recall, perhaps also to talk about feeling inspired, re-inspired, right? Feeling like, oh, we are still present, very much present, and there are new opportunities to connect. So we're looking forward to seeing how else other communities, including our own, will move forward because of these discussions that are reopening for, you know, for queer brown folks.
And I think the lesson of the film is that, you know, we need to document our lives, right? Like, there's so much media that's being generated, and then it, you know, whatever, it goes on social media and then it's gone forever. Like, I think the lesson of the film that it's important to document, but it's also important to make sure that that document is seen and like is, you know, that's precious material that you need to take care of, you know, and make sure that people know that we exist and that we existed, and they can't erase us, you know, they can't erase us.
How many times did you all cry and laugh and have fun when you put the film together?
Oh my God, when Barb showed me their edit of, it wasn't really an edit, it was like the scene where you're looking at the sky and some, you know, there's like
the
palm trees. And then it's the Patty Austin song being sung by a friend from our camping days. I just bawled. It was just so moving for me, you know, just the feeling of it. Like, and so that's my favorite part of the film, actually. So,
well, speaking of favorite parts, my favorite part is back in the day when I take my video camera and shoot everything. I loved lying down on the street and having people walk all over me. And the camera, and you just see feet coming to the camera. And it's such a beautiful angle that when I first started doing maybe a minute or 2 minute edit in the very beginning, that is what sold me to say, oh my God, look what we have here. This is a story. They're not just stepping on me, but it's like this perspective of like this amazement coming to me moved me so much. I said, oh, I need to talk to Des. We need to work on this piece. Yeah. We've gone through different iterations of the edits. We live on different parts of the coast.
Yeah.
Right. She's coast, I'm West Coast. And so we are working around the clock. And yeah, I think it was very challenging to do that, including, you know, like trying to understand our groove again as collaborators. And so it was a really excellent exercise to know trust.
Yeah, to rediscover our collaborative connection.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really very fulfilling, the whole process. So, and at first when we finished the film, I was depressed. I was like, what do we do now?
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing on my weekends? Like,
I guess we had to show it.
There was a moment there where it was like, oh God, what do I do with the rest of my life? film is done.
Nadia, do you have a favorite part of the film for yourself?
Uh, I mean, the when it starts with the two Lisa and somebody else talking about the
Yeah.
friends that they've shared, and so that was classic opening, perfect opening bit, and then that towards the middle, end of the second portion where you're transitioning from the I hate you part to the I forgive you part, and there are bits of that, and then the talking about and for me, I love the footage of all the Pride, New York Pride bits. They're so funny and so interesting and so vibrant and so despite all the sepia and the degraded footage, it's just so lively. So it just really helped me. It was good fun to see that. Also, in fact, there are bits of it where we see the as somebody's talking about how they're being cultured into being Filipino, which is being attractive to the to the men around them, and then there's a procession of Filipino people, I think, and then that reminds me a lot of a film called San Soleil, which is one of my favorite sort of documentaries. A film called San Soleil, which also talks a lot about memory and sort of using archival footage, and there are very subject matter and stylistic choices are very different, but there are elements from here that will fit there and elements from there that will fit here, which it was good fun for me to look at these two films and look at that kind of sort of resonance happening across films and filmmakers and film cultures and things like that.
I love how it just ties a lot of other a lot of traditions, like different
Yes.
traditions of storytelling. I love that you were
Yes.
able to see something in other films too. We feel
Yes.
inspired, with the festival run. We've been meeting fellow filmmakers who've heard about the piece, who want to share, like, stylistically, we should take a look at each other's films here, or like even talking about future projects. So it's been amazing to hear the response, even from our peers.
So, which gives me a great way to enter into, and this is entirely up to the two of you if you want to talk about this. The three sort of narrative segments of the film, and what was happening and why, if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, initially we had all this footage. We didn't know how to tell the story. We needed some, like a map, a narrative map. And a lot of my motivation for making this film specifically with Barbie was to repair my relationship with Barb. And so at some point in the process, I talked to them about including that meta story within the story that we were telling. Like, it wasn't just about Kilawin, it was about us. And, initially, of course, that's really difficult for someone to put themselves in the film and to be vulnerable like that. So it took a while, I believe, for Barb to kind of warm up to the idea. But then we showed rough cuts around, and then we had some very clear advice around how to frame the story and how to make it really, resonate and be relevant. I was telling an advisor about how Barb's would carry the footage from city to city, and their process of thinking about whether they should get rid of the film or the tapes, or whether they should keep it. And of course, this person was like, "Oh my God, that's the story. That's part of the story. You need to include that." So that's how we found our narrative arc, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so, you start. It's like falling in love. You fall in love at some point. You get sick of this person, and like, if you're lucky, you reconcile at the end. So it's a very universal arc, I think. So
right. How else do I follow up from that? Hang on a second. So how we came up to the title design of I Love You, I Hate You, I Forgive You, while we were putting these together and finding that particular arc that kind of turns the whole story in its head, you notice that the archival footage in the past is somewhat like, in the first two parts, right? But as we're traveling to the present, it becomes very, very present in our minds. You can see the different quality. And of course, the traveling through a car, traveling through counting backwards to like, we're again, instead of walking down a parade of people, we're just walking down a forest path, and time is moving and swirling around us. And we're just in this loop. Like, what do we do to reconcile, to just kind of move forward with our understanding of like history and like this memory? And I kind of joked. I said, it's sort of like, I love you, I hate you, I forgive you. And then it just kind of stuck. We're like, oh, that's interesting. And so we have the three parts. Otherwise, we would have just been showing parade footage. And we're like, oh my gosh, when is this parade going to end? Yeah. But the parade never ended. As you see, we keep marching. We keep marching forward.
Great. I mean, I lots more questions, but I think we'll have to talk. We'll keep talking through other places. I want to ask you about the film itself. You said you are not making it for a mainstream sort of an audience, and it's going. It's. But what other distribution places are you looking at? Are you thinking of taking the film around the world, elsewhere? Screenings elsewhere, maybe in Philippines, maybe in Asia somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, Kashish is our Asian premiere, so thank you so much for that. We are hopeful of a Philippine premiere. One of our old colleagues who's raised here in New York City or lived here for a while is now living in the Philippines and really wants to help us bring the film to the Philippines. We are screening in Canada and mostly queer festivals, in the US and mostly Asian American festivals, which is very interesting. We have yet to premiere at a queer festival in the US, so I don't know what that means. We are next screening in Vancouver at the Vancouver Queer Film Festival.
Yes. QFF.
Yeah, we have a streaming license for next year with Open Television, which is a queer Black-owned nonprofit. And they gave us funding to do a little bit of the traveling and the PR for this film. We're open to ideas for distribution. We'd love to find like a proper distributor globally and in the US. Mm-hmm. One of the things we've been told is that the length of the film is a bit hard. It's 40 minutes, so it's not quite a feature. It's not quite a short. We're very hopeful about an educational distribution.
Or programming with like, partnering with other filmmakers or like with different formulas to make the 40 minutes worth programming.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And again, I can't keep telling you enough how I love the film and how it reminds me of so many other bits and pieces of my own sort of journey. And so thank you very much for the film. And thank you for coming to Kashish, and thank you for talking to us.
Thank you, Nandika. Thank you, Sridhar. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate this.
Thank you, Nandika, for hosting this conversation so beautifully and bringing out so many different aspects of the film. And the people who are going to watch the film and watch the Q&A will get a lot more insights about the film and the filmmakers and their vision. Why made this film? How is it going ahead? So thank you so much, Barbara and Desireena, to share your views. And thank you. And all of you watching this, please watch more films at Kashish Online Film Festival. We have 100+ films and 3 more weeks to go. So please stay on and watch and tell all your friends, share it. And let's make this festival a joyful experience across the world.